fucking ashamed of yourself. You're fucking scum. You're fucking pigs! Patriarchy. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
You woman hater!
Patriarchy, fuckface!
You and your son and your everybody and your friends are fucking men!
Fucking scum!
This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like! This is what men's rights look like!
Feminist theory is not the Bible. It is not the Declaration of Independence. It is not the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Damn right we target feminist ideology. Feminist ideology teaches nothing but hate and contempt for men and boys.
Feminism must be like a psychedelic drug. I swear to God, because nothing they say is remotely close to reality.
We're going to continue to call feminists out on their hate and bigotry, and we really don't give a damn if they like it or not.
Well, you know what, feminism, if you don't like the rule of law, then don't be part of society. Go somewhere else.
Blue Collar Red Pill, with your host, the One Dan Army Dan Herons, and Jack Nightrunner Barnes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Blue Collar Red Pill Radio. Tonight, we have with us very special guests. He goes by two different names. One is Obsidian Raw, and the next, his other name is Mumia Ali. But before we get to him, I'd like to introduce my co-host. Dan, are you there?
I am back, brother. How you making out this week?
Oh, I'm doing fairly well. Dan, the man from Canuckistan, how you doing?
Well, the Cosby incident and the local police are keeping me fairly busy, but, we're working through that, making sure all the information gets out there, the truth is told, and looking forward to holding those feminist criminals responsible for their actions.
That's awesome, and I'm sure we're going to get into that some more tonight. But before we do that, obviously we need to bring on our guest. Mumia, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
All right. How are you, sir?
I'm doing really good. I'm glad to be here.
Great to have you aboard, Mumia.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about how what first got you interested in gender issues?
Well, I've always been interested in it as a younger person. And, hold on a second. I'm sitting in the middle of a meeting here.
Yeah, why don't you tell us all? Why don't you tell us what? Okay. Mumia is sitting in a men's meeting right now as we speak. So he's doing this live from a men's meeting. I believe it has something to do with substance abuse.
Right.
But yeah, Dan, why don't you tell us?
For those of you who don't know Mumia, he's got a whole bunch of articles up on A Voice for Men. They deal with the issues that specifically black men face. A lot of them deal with those issues, and he covers a lot of how black feminists are actually throwing black men under the bus in the pursuit of, for lack of better words, in their pursuit of greed. It seems that the black feminists desire to do is to throw anyone they can under the bus to climb up on the corpses to better their lot in life. Would that be a fair statement, Mumia?
Yeah, it would be.
Now, Mumia's been doing an insanely great job at covering this for A Voice for Men, and we're ever so thankful for his contributions there. And it's great to have him aboard to give his valued insight into this phenomena that is basically starting to play out across cultures. We're starting to see it happening, outside of or in other cultures. I can point to Anil Kumar, who's covering that in India. And we have other individuals who are covering it in Islamic states like Iran and whatnot. I can't remember the the gentleman who's covering that for us over there. But again, it's happening systemically across the board and in different cultures and different countries. And Mumia has been doing an incredible job taking care of this on the American scene for us. Where do you foresee this? Where did you see this starting there, Mumia, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, Good question. Pardon me, my whispering. Um, well, like I said, I'd always been interested in gender issues, but what did it for me is I ran across the manosphere about 6 years ago, and I stumbled on a blog by a guy named Rossi, and that's how it all got started. I was reading him, and that led me to another blog, and led me to Men News Daily. At the time, Paul Elam was an editor over there, and I read that. And I read a few other men's-oriented blogs, and The Spearhead was another one. And I was commenting a lot on Rossi's blog, and a number of people really liked what I had to say and encouraged me to, start a blog of my own. I had never written before. And so in the fall of 2009, I started up my own little small blog and never looked back. And I wanted to discuss a lot of the gender issues that I saw at street level in black life.
What was the name of that blog that you started?
It was called the Obsidian Files. And it ran from, actually it's still up right now at BraveNet. You can still see it.
Would you like to slip
but I
plug
just
to that?
haven't written on it in a long time. But
if I'm not mistaken, you wrote for another blog for a while before coming to AVFM. Didn't you write for another blog before you came to AVFM?
Yeah, that's correct.
What was the name? What's the name of that blog?
I co-founded a blog called Just Four Guys, and I co-founded that, and we started it in the summer of 2012, and it was a heck of an experience. I left it in last fall, and it was a really good learning experience. And I've also written for the Spearhead, the Good Men Project, and the Urban Politico, and now for Voice for Men. So I had no idea. Oh, and I've also written for a blog that is no longer around called In Malafide. I wrote for them too. And I had no idea I was going to be like a men's issues blogger, journalist, writer 5-6 years ago. Somebody would have told me that. I'd have told them they was insane. But it all kind of just happened, and I'm glad to be here.
It's amazing how we find ourselves, how a lot of us just kind of fall into this situation after being experiencing the love of a nasty woman, or experiencing love that feminism has for men, shall we say. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's really great how guys, instead of just taking it lying down and rolling over and letting the system have their way with them, it's really great to see how, we're starting to gather, we're standing up and telling, feminism and feminist-inspired policy to go take a hike, and that it's no longer welcome in our communities.
Who's speaking right now, Jack?
That was Dan.
Is Dan? Okay.
Yes.
Dan, I just want to make something clear. It's often said, about us, about men's rights guys, manosphere types, that we're all kind of like losers in love and that sort of thing. I want to make something clear. I'm not a loser in love. I've never had a problem getting the company of ladies if I wanted it and whatnot. I was interested in giving a different side to these discussions. That's what I was about. It wasn't about being butthurt or being angry or mad. It was just trying to present a sense of balance on these issues. I kind of bristle at this notion that all manospherians are, bitter small dick losers or something. I think the issues are bigger than that, and I think that we should have respect for that. You know what I mean? I don't think it's fair to try to pigeonhole us into this kind of sour grapes mentality, because it's just not true for all of us. It's not true for me. That doesn't negate the men who have had problems, but I think we can have an adult conversation in this society around questions of gender and sexual politics, and my specialty with class and race and how they all intersect, and without going into name calling or trying to character assassinate people. You know what I mean? I just want to put that in there.
Well, I agree, 100%, and I highly doubt that a lot of the guys are, a lot of the folk in the manosphere are butthurt about love. I think they're, I would posit that they are railing against injustice. Okay, and it's an injustice that's perpetrated on behalf of feminism. Not just any one woman, but that ism. That is just another hate-filled ism, that ideology known as feminism. In my time, I've dated some head turners, and never had a problem. As a matter of fact, I still get the odd. At my age, I still get the odd come on, and usually politely turn them down because I really just don't have time for it right now. At this stage in my life, things are going. Things in the manosphere are occupying a substantial amount of my time, to say the least. But a lot of them come into the manosphere. The second wives, I can think of Hannah Wallen as being one. She's a second wife who experienced the tragedy, loss, and injustice via her love, her husband. I'm going to say husband. I don't know if they're husband and wife. But a lot of them I think that it's not. Well, I would bet my eye teeth that it's not a dislike or a hatred towards women, but it's a hatred towards injustice.
Right.
Yeah, I would.
But that's a really important point,
married.
Because that's how we are perceived by the other side. They want to paint us as this rabid cabal of misogynists and whatnot, and it's silly. Come on. I try to address issues, not personalities. You know what I mean? And I bristle at this notion that all the guys in the manosphere are just these rabid, foaming at the mouth misogynists. And it's just silly. It really is.
Yeah, it's what they try to use to poison the well. They they throw these labels at us: misogynist, racist, homophobe, and all that. They throw that at us so that people won't listen to us. But the problem with that is those labels have been used so much and have been worn out that the really smart people just won't listen to that anymore. They'll go and see for themselves. But yeah, that's the reason they call us misogynists, is just to they don't call us that just to tick us off. They call us that so other people will go, ooh, they're misogynists. We don't want to listen to them. But yeah, it is silly, but it's the only tactic they've got.
Right. Which is sad because, for me, I welcome debate. And I want impassioned debate. I try to approach things from a standpoint of being open to hearing the other side out. Let's have the debate. That's what our republic was built on. Was built on debate. And they don't do that. They obfuscate. They name call. They try to character assassinate. They attack people's. This whole thing right now with Bill Cosby is a good example. instead of having, the proper form for of which he is accused, they instead attack his good name, his legacy, in the press. That's not the way to do things. That's character assassination. That's not finding out the truth. I want the truth. If the truth comes out that, say, for example, in this case, Bill Cosby is a rapist, then then I'm willing to deal with that. If it comes out, on the other hand, that he's not a rapist, then I'm willing to deal with that. I want the truth. That's what I want. And the other side, those that oppose us and criticize us, in my opinion, aren't interested in the truth. They're interested in ideology and personality.
Yep.
And that's not the kind of society I was raised in. That's not the kind of society I want to live in. That's not the ideals that made our republic. I don't want to be a part of a society that's about whom. I want to be a part of a society that's about the truth.
Well,
Well said.
I understand it's not the society we were promised either. I remember growing up, and I was told, and we were taught in school, innocent until proven guilty, due process, the rule of law, and this is how society operates. As I got older and I experienced a little bit more life, I found out that they were selling us a load of lies, a bill of goods for profit.
Yeah.
And really, this is unacceptable. I got no respect for the politicians that are sitting there lying out of one side of their mouth and smiling out of the other. Sorry about that. Your days, it's time for you to be voted out of office. Get rid of your ideology, and it's time for society to get back to, somewhere in the middle there where everybody's treated equal.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. I agree with that. We need to do what Oliver Cromwell did to those guys and turn them all out.
Yep. Mumia, why don't you tell us what you hope to bring to A Voice for Men? What do you hope to discuss?
Well, what I hope to discuss is a lot of the issues that have been discussed in terms of sexual politics in America thus far have been conducted in a way that, in my opinion, is rather narrow. That is to say, it's all conducted with the assumption that everyone is white, upper middle class, in that vein. And it kind of leaves out a lot of people who don't, fit into that mold. And I like to see how these questions play out on a larger palette. And so that's what I try to bring to A Voice for Men, is a perspective of a black man that's not upper middle class, definitely not white, and to try to deal with these issues in that way and how it plays itself out. My chief critique is with regard to black feminists who, over the past half a century, have, in my opinion, contributed. They didn't do it themselves, but they contributed to where the black nation, if you will, is right now. The black family is right now. They've contributed to it. They've contributed to the breakdown of the black family. They've contributed to the enormous levels of strife and discord and acrimony between black men and black women. They've contributed to the continued demonization of black men. What good have they done for black people? What good have they done for black women, for that matter? How have they improved black women's life? How? Black women are the least likely to get married. Black women are the most likely to have children out of wedlock and to have multiple children by multiple baby daddies. Half of all black women have herpes. I mean, what are they doing to address these questions? I don't see any evidence that they're doing anything. If anything, it's getting worse. It's going back to the Bill Cosby issue. In a recent article I wrote for Voice for Men, I led off that article with a quote by then nominee, now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And that was circa 1991. The year is now 2015, almost a quarter century later. Back then, black feminist argument was that we were putting up a black man in front of a black woman who was put upon, even though her case was shaky at best. Now, so we fast forward a quarter of a century later. What have black feminists done to improve the lot of black women in that space of time? From where I sit, they've gone backward, not forward. You know. So yeah,
Well,
I have
would argue,
real problems with black feminists in that respect.
I
And
would
that's just
argue
the tip of the
that exactly what they want is they want more victims, just like white feminists or any other, subset of feminism. They want more victims. They want more problems to point their finger at. They want more fatherless households. They want more women dependent on the state, and that's basically their shtick. And it's I've heard of a lot of black MRAs say that white people need to pay attention because where the black community is today is where the white community will be in 20 years. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
It's spot on. Spot on. Not only have the relatively few black MRAs said is correct, but white academics from across the ideological spectrum, from Andrew Hacker from Andrew Hacker on the left to Charles Murray on the right, and everywhere in between, Kay Heimowitz and Andrew Cherlin. I mean, all over the ideological map, from the left to the right, all of them have said the same thing. They all said the exact same thing. That where black America is now is where white America is heading. And the numbers speak for themselves. Like I said earlier, some 65% of black women right now as we speak have children out of wedlock with more than one baby daddy. Over 60% of all black women. Okay, that number for Hispanic women is around somewhere between 40 and 45%. For white women, it's around 25% at present. Okay, that was the number of black out of wedlock births in circa 1960. Okay, white people now are where black people were a half a century ago. Okay, so we're seeing it grow bigger and bigger. 2011, I think, was the year that not only were there more non-white births in America, but there were more births to basically baby mamas than there were to women who were married. Okay, so yeah, it's trending in that direction. There's no question about it. Charles Murray did an excellent job in a book he wrote a few years ago called "Coming Apart: The State of White America, 1960 to 2010." And he talks about the exact same thing. Matter of fact, his whole point in writing that book was because so many people got after him for writing the bell curve that he wanted to prove that the exact same things that are happening in black America are happening in white America. So there it is. There you go.
It's going across the board. I would argue that we're Latin America, Asia, India, Pakistan. It's going across the board. Feminism seems to have this virulent property that it spreads like like a bad case of the flu, and it leaves society and cultures in tatters in its wake, with an increase in suicides and fatherless homes, and women that are at their wits' end after trying to have it all by working and raising a family on their own. Feminism really just hates any family unit, especially the heterosexual family, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, it was fascinating about that, and I'm not going to sit here and say that the manosphere doesn't have its fair share of what some would consider racist, what others would consider homophobes and whatnot. They do. I've seen it firsthand. Having said that, I've seen a lot of guys in the manosphere that have open arms toward men of other races. I'm a living proof of that, toward men of other races and men of other sexual orientations. I myself have no problem with gay men or trans men or whatever. They ain't never done nothing to me. But there is something to be said about this idea. And I read an article just the other day, a woman named Margaret Covid out of the UK. She's a dominatrix, and she deals with submissive men. I have no problem with that. I'm for freedom of association. But she somehow attempts to make some kind of convoluted argument about how somehow if more men would just open up about being more submissive and all the rest of it, that's a bunch of crap. The vast majority of guys don't roll like that. They just don't. The vast majority of guys don't get down like that. And I think this is the reason why a lot of people have problems with the pickup community, because they're dealing with, for lack of a better way, I know this is going to sound politically incorrect for some, they're dealing with red-blooded guys that like women, man. And, bottom line, and that's almost a taboo in our time, to be a guy who likes women, man. Who wants to have sex with women. It's almost like a taboo to say that. It's almost like it's better if you're a gay guy, or it's better if you're, an all quote-unquote guy, or something like that. But if you're a guy who just likes women, you like to approach women, you like to have sex with women, and you make that openly known, it's somehow like you're deviant or something. And I reject that argument. I reject that premise. I vehemently reject it, which is one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate for pickup and whatnot, because it's the only true sex positivity for straight men that currently exists. And I use that language and write that way because it's very subversive. The very people who claim to be so sex positive, which are third wave feminists, suddenly recoil when it comes to the pickup guys. So what you're saying is sex positivity for me, but not for thee.
Oh well, that's.
It's I've said. Go
ahead, Jack.
I've said that feminism is like the Westboro Baptist Church. That they're fine with sexuality as long as it's the sexuality that they approve of.
That's a very good point. I like that analogy. That's a very good analogy. I like that because in some way, yeah, I can see the connection. You're right. They approve of certain types of approved groups and certain type of approved private practices. Once again, here we go again. Pissing on the ideals of our republic. Want to tell other people what to do in their bedrooms. These were the same people when the whole thing about gay marriage, which I have no problem with. Gay people want to get married. Okay, fine. That doesn't impact my life. Doesn't pick my pocket nor break my leg. I'm good with it. So they were arguing that the conservatives were trying to tell people what they do in the bedroom. Now we got yes means yes law in California. Isn't that the same thing? Telling people what to do in the bedroom? I thought the bedroom was sacrosanct. I thought that all fell on the Fourth Amendment. I'm for staying out of people's bedrooms, man. Whatever they want to do, that's fine with me. But it seems to me like Jack said, the Westboro Baptist Church argument. They want to come in there and say, if you're not having sex the way we say you should have sex, then you need to be locked up, you need to be condemned, and all the rest of it.
I'm just going to point out a couple things there, Obsidian, and it deals with that New Statesman article by that woman. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. First, the yes means yes.
Margaret Covid.
Margaret. Okay, I'm just going to go with Margaret. But the yes means yes. Okay. First of all, that seems a fucking lot like BDSM culture, bondage and domination sadomasochism culture, where
interesting you make that point because I made that argument for A Voice for Men in the article where I that was the name of the article. I call it the BDSM origins of yes means yes. So I'm in agreement with that's exactly my view.
I'm in agreement with you there, and I will let it be known that I am a former dungeon monitor for one of the largest fetish fashion shows in the world. It was Northbound Leather's Fetish Fashion Show, and I used to be a monitor there. A long time ago,
and let me say, for the record,
let me say for the record, I have no problem whatsoever with BDSM culture or anything like that. Again, I'm for freedom of association. My problem with that I made in the article was that though the people who came up with this idea of yes means yes are attempting to cherry pick key concepts of BDSM culture and lifestyle and superimpose it in an environment that's fundamentally unsuited for that. College is, by its definition, a transitory environment with very young people who don't even know who they are yet. I just find it to be deeply problematic.
Absolutely there, Mumia. Let me get back. I'm going to circle back into that, okay? Now, the next point is Margaret there, all right? She's a professional dominatrix. Now, majority of the customers she's seeing are, and I'm going to go with the male side of things here, but the majority of the males that she is seeing are high-end lawyers, politicians possibly, CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. People who are under stress and controlling their environments at all times. And they come, and it has been my experience, and I do know a few dominatrixes, it has been their experience as well, that those guys are visiting those dominatrixes so they can, for lack of a better term, let their hair down and release, and relinquish, the control of the reign.
Right.
So that's her experience, and that's why she comes up with that. It's a flawed theory on her part. Now, I was going to circle back onto the BDSM thing, and darn it all, I forgot what I was going to say about that, but oh well, we'll move forward. I'd like to bring up a known black feminist, Wagente, I can't think of her last name. She writes for the Washington Post sometimes, but she chimed in on the UVA, University of Virginia hoax there. And she said that, regardless of, discrepancies and a lack of credibility by Jackie Coakley there, that we should believe anyways that a crime occurred. Would you say that is pretty much what goes on across the board with black feminists, in your experience?
See, here's the thing. I wrote about this, too, on The Voice for Men. Here's the problem with black feminists. If you notice, black feminists' modus operandi is basically to try to pile on to anything that white women are doing. So you have this whole thing with the UVA scandal, which, let's be honest, didn't have anything to do with black women, okay? The UVA thing goes back to what I was saying earlier, was basically a white upper middle class issue. Frat boy culture, hookup culture on the nation's selective college campuses. All right, it's a de facto white upper middle class issue. Okay, had nothing to do with black women, but of course, the feminists that you mentioned, as well as Zerlina Maxwell and all the rest of it, they want to pile on because what black feminists' real problem is that they're deeply envious of Miss Ann. That is to say, a certain type of white woman. Okay. They're very envious of white women. If you study the history of black feminism, you'll see that they have constantly, to this day, tried to ingratiate themselves with white feminists and are constantly rebuffed and rejected. It's interesting, this whole argument with street harassment, this so-called street harassment issue. And the argument goes that men just can't take no for an answer. If anybody can't take no for an answer, it's black feminists. How many times and how many ways do these white women need to tell them they don't want them in their movement? They don't see solidarity with them. They only use them when they're convenient. They prove it time and again. 2 summers ago, it was the hashtag solidarity is for white women, right? Mickey Kendall, black internet feminist, started that because she was in a huff that Jill Filipovic and Jessica Valenti and all these types went and cottoned Hugo Schweitzer, okay, over top of black feminists who, according to black feminists, he was dogging out and harassing and all the rest of it. And then here we see once again in the fall of last year with Hollaback New York video fiasco, where they didn't even ask black women to be involved in their video that they made lambasting black men for supposedly being sexual predators for saying good morning. That sort of stuff. So anything black feminists do you always have to keep in mind they're doing because they are butthurt. They ain't Miss Ann. Okay? That's right off the bat. You just have to see it right in that lens, straight away. And as for the issue or the question of all women needing to be believed, I wrote an article for A Voice for Men directly addressing Mrs. Alina Maxwell, where in the title I asked who died and made her Red Queen. I mean, once again, we want to subvert the rule of law. We want to subvert American democratic traditions and norms and say that a woman has to be believed no matter what. No, we have due process. We have a process of discovery. We have the mechanisms of the legal system and the criminal justice system to deal with that. It's not perfect. It's an imperfect system. As a black man, if anybody knows it, I know it. But it's the best system we have, and it's much better than just simply believing all women. Because a lot of black men have hung from trees behind believing, a woman say, oh, he did this to me, and come to find out, in truth, he didn't do it. But by then, it's too late. He's dead. He's strange fruit hanging from a tree. And it really disgusted me that Zerlina Maxwell, who happens to be black like me, went on ahead and said some ridiculous stuff like that. And I was very heartened to see all the comments in the Washington Post taking her to task on that point.
Mumia, you bring up a really interesting point with that there. Do you have any theory on why black feminists have collectively forgotten what the suspension of due process has done in recent past?
Well, once again, it goes back to what I'm saying. You have to see the Black Feminist Project in this particular lens. It is about being butthurt that they're not Miss Ann. The profile of most black feminists is this. I wrote about this. As a matter of fact, I wrote about it, again, an article for Voice for Men called The Miss Ann Syndrome, where I lay out the profile of a black feminist, and I'll probably write more about this in the near future. But to just lay it out right here, the profile of a black feminist is usually, they're not always, but usually middle class. They go to schools, predominantly white schools. They don't tend to go to all black schools, that sort of thing. They tend to go to predominantly white schools, heavily mixed schools. They spend a lot of time in a white world, for lack of a better way of putting it. They tend to go to white universities. They don't tend to go to HBCUs too much. That's historically black colleges and universities like Howard or Hampton or whatever. They don't tend to do that. They tend to go to your big state schools or your Ivies or something like that. Real left-wing, liberal type institutions. Okay, and they then go into, do-gooder social justice work, nonprofit or, some kind of quasi-governmental entity, where they don't really do a heck of a lot and just do a lot of make work, and they have a lot of time on their hands. And and through these types of things, they get to see the world of Miss Ann, Like, for example, I'll give you an example of what I mean. Let's take the hookup culture. In black American society, if a woman has a reputation for like hooking up a lot and stuff like that, that greatly diminishes her chances of getting married. Brothers who have options ain't gonna wife her up. Now, be sure he'll sleep with her, no doubt. They'll hang out, no doubt. But he ain't putting a ring on it. Okay. But in white America, in upper middle class white America, a white woman could hook up like crazy and still get her Chad at the end of the day. Now, see, that really chaps the hide of a lot of these black women that see that and observe that, you see. So a lot of what animates black feminists is their enviousness of Miss Ann and their butthurtness that they can't do what Miss Ann can do.
Would a fair assessment be that it's internalized racism on their part?
Well, I mean, that's one way of putting it. I never thought of it that way, but I guess that's one way of putting it. I mean, I do see it as a sickness, to be quite frank. I see it as a mental disorder. my thinking is, instead of focusing on stuff that you can't do anything about, even Michael Jackson couldn't turn himself white. I mean, instead of focusing on things you can't do anything about, focus on the things you can do something about. Like, I got an article coming up. It'll be out tomorrow, dealing with a black feminist named Brittany Cooper. And, she's in this, on a tear because her nephew was, watching an Iggy Azalea performance and cheering her on. And my thing is, if that had been Adele, Brittany Cooper wouldn't have had a problem with it. Brittany Cooper's problem isn't, white singers, or in this case, white female singers, appropriating black musical idioms. The problem is that Brittany Cooper is upset that she's not attractive, she's not conventionally attractive, and Iggy Azalea is. That's the problem. And instead of Brittany Cooper addressing herself to backing away from the table and losing the weight and doing other things to make herself more attractive to the men she can attract, she instead scapegoats Iggy Azalea and black men in toto under some rubric of cultural appropriation and somehow beating up on black women. It's ridiculous. It's pathetic. And she's not fooling, by the way, she's not fooling anybody, okay? But that's the other thing about black feminists. Black feminists are a lot like, the emperor with no clothes. They're not fooling anybody. Everybody knows, the jig is up. Everybody knows what's going on here. It's just that, a lot of white folks, rightly, don't bother to get involved with that type of thing because it's not worth it. And sadly, too many brothers, unlike you guys, a lot of brothers are just real silent. We like the silent kill. We ain't going to make, for the most part, we're not going to make blogs and YouTubes and internet radio and all that. There's a few of us that do it, but the vast majority of us will just silently vote with our feet. Which is, I mean, and the stats bear that out, So that's really what's driving the black feminists, is that it's a racial thing. They're deeply envious and jealous of white women. That's the bottom line, And if once you see it in that lens or through that lens, then everything is easily explained after that. And you see why, like this whole street harassment thing, black feminists attempted to try to say that, black women are really being put upon and all the rest of it. And I just simply asked them a question. Okay, so how come y'all guys don't make your video of 10 hours of a sister walking through NYC? Make your video. Nobody's made a video. If it's what they say it is, how come they haven't made a video where you can see all these men from all walks of life just pawing, black women and saying all kind of crazy stuff and whipping their wangs out and throwing bottles at them and all the rest of it. I mean, we could all see it for ourselves. The fact that they don't even the fact that we even have to ask that question, that video doesn't exist, tells you that it doesn't exist for the most part. Yeah, you get a knucklehead here and there, like they talked about the case up in Detroit. A woman by the name of Mary Spears got shot by a guy. Okay, fine. They talk about another guy in New York City slashed a woman in the face or whatever. Fair enough. They never heard the saying, extreme cases make bad law. I mean, these are extreme, statistically insignificant cases. They don't say anything about a trend.
That's a great saying there, Mumia. I really like that one. Can you say that again? Say it a little louder, would you please?
Extreme cases make bad law.
Absolutely. We're experiencing that pretty much in the first world across the board. And I'm going to point to a recent case, Ratia Parsons. And what that dealt with was basically consensual sex that some underage individuals engaged in took pictures of and then, spread amongst themselves. Now, this led to a huge cyberbullying kind of law up here in Canada, and it was built upon an extreme case.
I think I heard about that. Yeah.
Now, that being said, we are society in general is dropping the ball on the capabilities of cell phones. We're playing catch up on this, and our youth is actually paying the ultimate price in some cases, some tragic cases here. These things need to be addressed, and feminism, their answer to it is, well, fuck it, let's slut walk it to death.
Right. And for black women in particular, my question is this. Are they really in a position to, because since the black feminist position is basically to ape Miss Ann, okay, so let's look at that. When you're white and you're upper middle class, you can do things, you can do dumb stuff. Like, for example, George W. Bush, for example. Yeah, he had his they call it his wandering years and all the rest of it. He has alcohol problems and stuff like that. He could do a couple of knuckleheaded things because he's a Bush. But, I can't do the things he does. The margin of error is smaller for me as a black man with no money in America. Okay? I'm a black, blue-collar, working-class black guy in America. The simple truth is I can't do those same things and come away smelling like a rose. We can argue up and down why that is. At the end of the day, that's what it is. I have a smaller margin of error. So I got to work with what I got. And I'm a realist. That's the other thing that really bothers me about the black feminists. They're not looking at reality. They're trying to deal with this quasi-metaphysical stuff instead of dealing with reality on the ground. As a black man, I work with reality on the ground and deal with life on its own terms. So what good would come from black women en masse slutting it up? Would that get them more husbands? Would that get them more fathers for their children? Would that get them more respect from society overall? Really?
To be honest, I've got more respect for a prostitute who's, above the board and straight up honest about things than the weekend slut walkers.
Well, yeah. See, that's the other thing too, is that they want these slut walker types. I think really are in front to legitimate sex workers, because they're not really dealing with sex worker issues. They're dealing with some crazy stuff. Which my understanding of that whole slut walk thing was it got started because a Canadian police officer simply made a commonsensical observation. And they got butthurt about it, and that's how this whole thing got started. That's my understanding of it.
Absolutely. It starts off in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. There was a police kind of lecture on how not to get raped, and the one of the officers made mention that dressing up kind of sluttily, which inhibits. He didn't put this part in there, but dressing up kind of sluttily with 10-inch high heels and a short skirt that don't let you take a full stride kind of makes you a wounded animal in the eyes of a criminal. He basically let it be known that, hey, if you wanted to reduce your chances of being raped, that not dressing in attire that would prohibit your free movement might be an idea. From there, it just kind of snowballed, and the feminist screech tirade, got in full swing, and misconstrued and took his quotes out of context and ran with it from there, which is pretty much all feminism has done. You were mentioning earlier how black feminists deal with abstract ideas and concepts. I would posit that feminism right across the board deals with imaginary concepts and ideas.
Yeah, and we need to be clear for the record. I'm all for women standing for public office. I'm all for women owning private property. I'm all for women being able to decide when they will become parents and when they won't, for any reason that they want. The problem I have is that they don't want men to be able to decide when they become parents for any reason that they want. So that's the problem I have. I'm for all those things. What would be called equity feminism. I'm for that. The problem that I have with feminism as it exists today, its radical ideological bent, is exactly what you said. It's all based on imaginary windmill tilting, and not rooted in facts, not rooted in evidence, and not rooted in anything firm or empirical, but rather these flights of fancy. And that was proven numerous times last year, and right now as we speak with regard to Bill Cosby. I mean, the UVA scandal proved that, these people are off the deep end. They're just straight up make up stuff. Hollaback proved that there was nothing empirical to ground their argument with regard to street harassment. No reasonable person could watch that video in New York City and come away with the thinking, yeah, we got a new scourge in our midst. All these men, like zombies out of World War Z or something, pawing women left and right. I mean, no, that's the reason why the video got parodied so much, because nobody buys it. Nobody believes it. It's crap.
I remember the parody video. You put in your article on that. That was priceless. I loved it.
Yeah, The Dark Knight, right?
That was beautiful. Oh, I was howling about that one. That was beautiful. Yeah, and it deservedly so. It earned its mocking. Really, 10 hours of a woman walking the streets, and from what I understand, it was pegged down to some of the more rougher neighborhoods. 10 hours, and the worst that they got was one guy possibly hanging around too much and being polite. I think the one guy walked in the same direction as her. I'm not going to say followed, because I can't say that he wasn't already headed in that direction.
Right.
But he let off about, I think, maybe 4 comments, and I don't think any one of them could be construed as sexually harassing.
Right.
At one point in time, he says, I guess I'm too ugly for you, or something like that. How that is sexually harassing to her is kind of, I don't know. It's delusional. Really, it's delusional that feminism would say that it is. That rightfully so, it deserves to be ridiculed. And it did. There was Star Wars parodies. There was all kinds of them.
Yeah, everybody got in on it. I mean, it was, and not just guys making the video, but women too. Christina Hoff Summers did an excellent job breaking down the video for her Factual Feminist series on YouTube. And there was one gentleman, and I know you guys saw it. There was one gentleman, very good-looking, conventionally attractive white guy, walked through New York City for only 3 hours. A third of the time that Hollaback claimed to have done their video, and they got the same rate of catcalling from women. Okay? So this idea that somehow catcalling is a gendered issue is wrong. It's false. It's a human issue.
Yeah, it is. And now feminism claimed that, men reduce women to, sexual objects. I'm kind of wondering how feminism squares that up with dildos that they use and stuff, because that seems like a sexual object to me, and that seems like a fuck of a lot of feminists are engaging in using them.
And not only that, here's the other thing with the whole sex object argument. On YouTube, there, if you search around for it, you find it. The same guys, I think, that made the 3 hours of walking in New York as a man video that I just mentioned. They did another series of videos where they, once again, in New York City on the subway. And speaking of dildos, what they did, they took a sock, right? Put it in the guy's pants so it makes him look like he's well endowed, okay? Sit him on the subway with a hidden camera with his well endowed state for all to see there in front of women, and just see what happens with these women. All the women were ogling these guys. Okay? So
yeah, I remember that video, and some of the women went so far as to take pictures.
That's right.
I wonder what they were doing with those pictures when they got home and alone.
Exactly. There was another series of talking about sex objects. A lot of women view men as success objects. There was a series of videos by the same guys, went and did a series of videos. They took a Lamborghini, okay? Said, okay, now we know that women won't talk to most guys on the street, but we want to see what happens when these women find out that I got this Lamborghini here. The guy went, he didn't have any difficulty at New York City, didn't have any difficulty at all getting women in that car. One woman who didn't even speak English, she was Asian, she was coming here visiting the United States as a tourist, she got in the car. Okay?
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct there, Mumia. I'm actually considering going to next year's Slut Walk dressed up as a wallet with a sign, "Stop Objectifying Me." And on that note, hey, girls,
yeah, we gotta wrap it up, guys.
You don't like it? Then don't fling. If you don't like, a mirror being held up to your own idiocy, or I shouldn't say failing, shortcomings. then tough shit. Then get out of the public eye and get out of the gender politics. But Mumia, I want to say what a great pleasure it has been talking to you. Finally, we've chatted back and forth in text, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the International Men's Conference in 2015 there, sir.
I sure will do everything I can to make it there, and I want to thank all of you for having me, and I hope I can come back again at some point.
I'd love to have you back there, Jack.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm sure we're both in agreement there. There's lots of stuff to there's lots of feminist fallacies to expose.
Thank you so much, fellas.
We're going to have him back. Yep. It was a pleasure. All right, Dan, I'm seeing, is there anything else you would like to say before we go? We got about 2 minutes left.
Well, as usual.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mumia.
Yes. Just keep reading The Voice for Men. I'm editor heading up the Urban Affairs desk there, and I deal with sexual politics and race and class issues from the brother on the streets perspective. And I try to write a column twice a week, usually on Monday and Thursdays, but sometimes it's a day late or a day early. So just keep an eye out through the week on The Voice for Men. I'm there, and you can reach me on Twitter at Obsidian Files.
Catch that there, folks. On Twitter at Obsidian File, and watch for Mumia's incredible articles and insight on A Voice for Men. And on that note, I'd like to urge you to take the red pill. And remember, you can lead a feminist to logic, but you can't make them think. Jack?
Dan?
Good night.
Jack,
good night,
hope
everybody.
You have enjoyed this episode of Blue Collar Red Pill. The song The Last Ones by the band Jazar is used under Creative Commons license and has been modified for this show. Please visit antimisandry.com and avoiceformen.com for more information on the men's human rights movement.